justice for all.
Thank you. Mrs. Rangel, would you please call the roll?
Roger Brock. Dean Button.
Here.
Michael Dye.
Here.
Ann Herbert.
Here.
William Hutton.
Here.
Thomas Kazmierzak.
Here.
Dan Spitali. Here. Sharon Zaney. Marcus Taylor.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
We have a quorum. Next item on the agenda, item 3, is the approval of minutes, February 21st, 2023. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve. I'll second that motion.
It's been moved by Commissioner Dye and properly seconded by Commissioner Hutton to approve the minutes of February 21st, 2023. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Roll call on the motion.
Roger Brock. Dean Button.
Yes.
Mike Dye.
Yes.
Ann Herbert.
Yes.
William Hutton.
Yes.
Thomas Kazmierzak.
Yes.
Dan Spitali. Sharon Zaney. Marcus Taylor.
Yes.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
Motion carries.
IT, are you online?
Someone from IT, are they available to comment, please?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You are recording now, aren't you, right?
The question is, are you recording at this time?
I am recording now.
in progress.
Thank you.
No problem.
Next item on the agenda is also under item 3, approval of the meeting minutes of March 20th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Councilman Spitali. Moved and properly seconded for the meeting minutes of March 20th. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Roll call on the motion.
Roger Brock. Dean Button.
Yes.
Mike Dye.
Yes.
Ann Herbert.
Yes.
William Hutton.
Yes.
Thomas Kazmierzak.
Yes.
Dan Spitali. Yes. Sharon Zaney. Yes. Marcus Taylor.
Yes.
That's 8 ayes, 0 nays.
Motion carries. Item 4 is old business.
There is no old business.
Item 5 is new business. First item on the agenda is item CP-23-05, a petition of the Hammond Department of Redevelopment to reclassify property at 2201 Calumet Avenue, Whiting, Indiana, from S-2 Institutional District to R-1 Single Family Residential District to construct, operate, and maintain a single-family residential subdivision within the City of Hammond, Lake County, Indiana. I'd ask the Mrs. Rangel if all of the public notifications have been met.
They have.
Thank you very much. And I would ask if the petitioner could please address the commission for the petition, please.
Good evening. My name is Randy Peterson. I'm with Marsh Consultants. We are the land surveyor and civil engineer consultant for this project. On behalf of the Hammond Redevelopment Department of, the RDC, I am here to present the petition before you. This property is currently platted as Lot 2 of Clark Fields Addition, currently zoned S2 institutional. We are seeking a change to R1 residential. The reason for this petition is for the allowance to construct a single-family residential subdivision. The petition for subdivision would occur after this petition, but we are seeking this change in zoning. Sorry, I lost my track of thought, but we're requesting a change of zone from S2 to R1 for a single-family residential subdivision. Thank you.
Questions for the petitioner? Formerly Clark Athletic Fields, properly zoned S1 at this time. Mr. Peterson?
Yes, S2.
S2.
S2, I beg your pardon.
S2 institutional.
S2 institutional. Thank you. Any other questions for the petitioner? Any other questions from the commissioners to the petitioner? Thank you, Mr. Peterson. At this time, we'll open it up for a public hearing, as we would do with every other petition that comes before the Hammond Plan Commission. So I would ask that if there was anyone wishing to speak, I'll just accept folks who are wishing to speak at this time. If you would sign in, please, with your name and your address, and also when that's completed, if you would kindly state your name and address, we would like to hear what you have to say.
Carolyn Marsh, 1804 Oliver Street in Whiting. I'm here to object to the zoning change from S2 to R1. I believe that this particular piece of land was acquired from the Park Department. There's a section here that was acquired from the Park Department. At a March 1 park meeting, a transfer of land, a section of land, was transferred to the Redevelopment Commission. And the Redevelopment Commission is voted to accept the land, and then a letter was sent to 300 feet residents from the site on March 21st, and now there's this, and they were notified of a public hearing for today, April 17th. Now, my question is, in all the meetings I've attended in Hammond by the mayor's night out or meetings on the Clark Field, there was never any mention that there was parkland to be transferred for this subdivision. I think that has to, I object to that type of process that we didn't know, and many of you were sitting on the panels at those meetings and never came forward and said there's parkland to be transferred. So I think that's wrong. I also have there's a lot of parcels here. It's not just Clark Field. So I don't think the public is aware of all the different sections of land and who owns them and how the transfers are. It's just not Clark Field, the school property. So I think there has to be a lot of more information given to the public. I have gone on the website. I can't find anything. I can't find any resolutions that actually say what the zoning change is. I found it from a letter to one of the residents that lives 300 feet. I couldn't find it anywhere else. The other thing is when you're changing it to, my objection is, when you change it to R1, single family, it also includes commercial in that R1, which the people don't know about. I have the R1, I read it, what it stands for, and it allows for commercial development. So that raises a red flag, because we want Calumet Avenue, it was remarked that it would be green space, no commercial development. But this R1 includes commercial development. So I really think that this should be voted down and have another public meeting on this with all the facts that have been withheld from the public.
Thank you, Mrs. Marsh. Pardon? Should we take comment first and then respond to the address? My experience has been we've accepted the public comment and then let the petitioner respond to the questions. Thank you. Next, please. Please sign in and then state your name and address.
My name is Dave Matura. My address is 2130 Superior Avenue, Whiting, Indiana.
Could you spell your last name?
Matura.
Thank you.
And even though my address says Whiting, I'm a Hammond resident.
Thank you.
So why am I here? Well, to address you and to try and convince you to not vote for this rezoning. And I'm going to say, since this whole subdivision topic has come up, I've lost many nights of sleep, and I've thought to myself, what good is this doing for the city? What good is this doing for me? What good is it doing for the average citizen? And I still struggle with that. And I think somebody said, well, it's going to create jobs. And then I think, well, I read in the newspaper that unemployment is at a record low in Indiana. I drive down Calumet Avenue and I see help wanted signs everywhere I look. And so I said, it's going to create jobs, but there's jobs that aren't even being filled now. So I can't say that's a good thing because it's not going to create jobs. There are jobs there. Then somebody said, well, it's going to raise your property values. And I said, yeah. And then my house is going to be reassessed and my taxes are going to go up. So I don't think that's a good thing. And then somebody says, well, it'll create more taxes, more tax base. And I thought about that and I said, well, this past year, I got 2 checks from the state of Indiana who's flush with tax money, billions in surplus. So I thought, well, again, what positive am I getting out of this as a citizen? So then I thought, well, from a historical standpoint, I've lived in Robertsdale all my life. And of course, the Clark Field athletic area was used when Clark Field, when the school was in existence. But when the school closed, I still noticed that there were kids playing soccer in the soccer field. There were still people playing tennis in the tennis courts. Older people were doing laps around the field, and other people were running. And I thought, even though it's out of service, it's still being used. And then one day, all the gates were locked. And I was tempted to put a sign up that said, this is your property, keep out, please. So I thought, from a historical perspective, the community used that property as it is. And then I was at a meeting, and I think it was the city attorney said he was fielding a lot of calls from people who were seeking interest in purchasing some of this property. And then on the way home from that meeting, I thought, well, sure, that makes sense. Who wouldn't want to live between that lake and that lake? It's between 2 parks. I can't think of a better piece of property in the city of Hammond to live in. And somebody else told me, well, I know somebody that wants to live there. And I said, that doesn't make it right that you should develop it. I know people who would build a house in Yosemite National Park if you let them. So I thought, yeah, okay, there's interest there because it's such a good piece of property. And then it occurred to me, well, wait a minute. Cal College, at the last mayor's night out meeting, the president said, Mayor, how's that property, the subdivision going? And I scratched my head and I thought, just a little bit ago, Cal College wants to build a football field. They don't have one. And I thought, we have a football field here. It's flat, it's level. There were goalposts, but they got cut down. It's got lights, it's got bleachers. What a perfect fit for Cal College. They wouldn't have to spend a dime. And then I thought, well, the city has an opportunity to make this a park. It is a park. It's a continuance of George Lake and Wolf Lake. I thought, you can't find a piece of property in Hammond between 2 parks. What a great opportunity. And there's this green movement and global warming and climate change, and everyone in the environment is getting concerned. And I thought this would be a great opportunity. Leave it green, plant it with trees, put in some pollinator gardens, and the community would just use it. And then I thought, well, maybe they'll sell it to a private developer. and he'll put the infrastructure in. And then I read, no, the city's putting in the infrastructure. The city's getting money from the federal government, and they're putting it in. And then I thought, well, darn it, that's my money. I don't know of any developer that gets the government to put in his gas lines, water lines, sewer lines, and electric lines. So who benefits? I'm still scratching my head. And then I thought, well, when I drive by and I say, wow, look at, there's 37 big, beautiful houses. I'm really happy for those 37 people. But what about the other 7,500 people in the city of Hammond? We get to look at it and say, I paid for that. I put in this infrastructure. I actually owned the property at one time as a citizen, but now those 37 people get to enjoy it, and I get to press my nose against the fence and look at them. And I said, well, then I'll be on the bike trail. And now I go on the bike trail, it's quiet. I'm hearing the geese, I'm hearing the birds. I'm going to see that guy swimming in his pool, enjoying my property. And I thought, I can't stay home. I have to come to this meeting. I have to tell you these things. I don't know if anyone's thought about that. Now, I'm sure the fellas that are going to sell the lots, or the people that are going to build the houses, or the people that are going to make the sales, they're all thrilled to death with it. But that benefits them as individuals. And I'm still struggling where it benefits the community. And somebody said, well, you get 37 more families. Yeah, I get 37 more, let's see, 37 times 2, that's 70 some more cars in my area. I get more noise, I get more air pollution, more water pollution. I get people playing their radios. I get a higher density of people. I'm not seeing where that benefits me. So when I sum it all up, I think it's the premier property in the city of Hammond, located between two parks, and not just any old parks, the park with the new venue and the pavilion. It's got a lake, another lake. There was an environmental center, but that's another story. It's a perfect piece of property to share with all the citizens, not just 37 families. And that's my position. So I would ask you all to consider that we weigh the good of the community and the good of all the people versus the good of those 37. And they'll be thrilled to death. I'm sure they will. And I'm sure the houses will be beautiful, and everyone will say, that's great. But once you put the pavement down, once you pour the concrete, that's it. There's no turning back. It's lost. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Matera, for your time.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Sure. Hi, Mr. Pustek.
I'm David Pustek. I've been before you a couple times, and I live at 2523 New York Avenue. That would be east of your development site across the lake, directly across the lake. Unfortunately, I didn't receive a notification, about this meeting. A couple housekeeping things, first of all. You need to look at your website on gohammond.com and update it. It is missing a lot of information, especially and what I would like to have happen on that site is to have the agenda posted either the day before or the week before, so that residents can look at the site, Hammond site, and see if there's any business that pertains to them. And because the notification process for this is, it's just very weak, and I've complained about this several times at the Mayor's Night Out meeting. The notification for here, let's see, there's no residents to the west of this property, there's no residents to the south of this property, there's no residents to the east of this property. So I would just guess that 10 residents were given the notification, because they live on the, they're on the north side. So I really would appreciate if someone would, take on the banner and let the public be notified of these situations, of these meetings, because it's very, it's just not happening. With regards to the petition, I would just like to see it either voted down or tabled. And the only reason why I say this is because there's property across Calumet Avenue, south of the pavilion, and in between Calumet Avenue and Sheffield. A huge lot of land there that, I don't think anyone would have a problem with building new housing there. The location here is right next to the lake, and George Lake. And from your experience and my experience, when the city gets involved that close to the property, they restrict it to residents. So look at the south side of George Lake. It's fenced in, no public access, where prior we had public access and prior we had trails. So I don't trust the city, to get this close to the lake and do development work. And, the mayor has commented that he would like to see the lake developed and, make it more recreational. But that would be a disaster. So that's my comment, and I would appreciate it if you can tell me how many residents were notified.
Thank you, Mr. Boostek. Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak on this topic? I see that there are a couple of extra people online. We do give the opportunity for those who do attend virtually to speak on the petition action. So I'd open it up at this time for anyone online wishing to speak. If you do wish to speak, we'd want to hear your name and address and for the record. Okay, seeing none. This will, well, I guess at this point I'd turn it over to the petitioner to see if he could help us answer any questions. Obviously, Mr. Poland, if you'd like to address any questions that were raised during the public meeting portion.
Yes, I'd like to. You have to officially close the public hearing.
I'm sorry?
You have to officially close.
Thank you. So at this point in time, we'll address some questions, and we're going to officially close the public meeting portion of this, and we'll continue with the petition.
I'd like to,
Mr. Poland.
thank you. I'd like to try and answer the questions. Hopefully I've got some good notes here. I think I want to just clarify some of the statements in the language is that the current fire station at the southeast corner of, I'm sorry, it's at 122nd and Calumet is currently owned by the city. The School City property, which was commonly known as Clark Fields, was initially transferred to the Parks Department, and then it was transferred to the Redevelopment Commission. The transferring to the Parks Department as under ownership does not turn it into a park. It's just ownership. The City of Hammond, through its various entities, can own property, but the Parks Department did not take any action to designate it as a park. I think there was a couple of comments made about the website, and I would say that the staff is looking into improving our website. We've talked internally about putting the agendas on the website and then putting the minutes on the website. We have not accomplished that yet, but that is one of the things that we've been talking about internally. The request tonight is to change the property to R1 Single Family Residential District. In all of our residential districts, well, let me rephrase that. In all of our residential districts and our commercial districts, there are the permitted uses, and then there are a set of uses that we refer to as conditional uses. The in the R1 in particular, the primary uses are single family, and there's some group home issues and some other things like that. Any of the non-residential uses are conditional uses. By definition, if that was being contemplated, that would be an action before the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that would require a similar process of notifications to the adjacent property owners and a public hearing process as to whether or not that is being contemplated. In this particular situation, with all of the public meetings that has happened at the Marina building over the past, 6 months or whatever it's been, we talked about that possibility of commercial being on Calumet Avenue. It was a clear indication from those public meetings that there was an opposition to have commercial on Calumet Avenue, and nothing in this act of rezoning is encouraging that, because we have made the commitment to the residents that none of this property will be developed as commercial. In general, when we talk about developing property from one use to another, we do understand that new investment will enhance the city's property values. As to whether or not taxes go up, if the development generates new property taxes, that doesn't necessarily automatically mean that your taxes go up on your property that's adjacent. Tax assessment is a function of the county, not of the city, based on the state law of the 1%, 2%, 3% caps of assessed valuation. The comment about the state sending surplus money to all of us, I think all of us enjoyed getting the extra money from the state, whether it was $300 or I don't remember what the exact dollar amount. But that's a separate issue from property taxes. That money that was given to us was based on the state law that says how the state gathers tax money from all its variety of sources, that if a certain, whatever their thresholds were that the state set up, that gives that refund back to us. That, again, that's not relevant to local property taxes. As far as whether or not the people were using the property for running or whatever they were doing, you have to remember that School City closed Clark School. They determined on their own that particular issue, and that they no longer needed the football field. So it was a question of what is the proper opportunity to reuse the property in another manner. During those public hearings, we had a lot of discussion similar to the comments made tonight about parks being development. When we get into the subdivision, you will see that there are 6 outlots that are open space, and I won't go into any more details right now if that's a discussion for the subdivision. So we've stated at those meetings that we knew that there was going to be some open space provided for in this neighborhood. We talked about a buffer, a landscape buffer along Calumet Avenue, and again, we'll discuss that further into the subdivision process. There's a lot of there were some comments related to the proximity to the lake, or the 2 lakes. We know that Robertsdale itself has probably the largest amount of open space than anywhere else in the city, and that this is an opportunity that we know as staff members of the city, that we do not have a lot of undeveloped land left in the city of Hammond, and we look for opportunities of opening up, and in this particular case, opening up a new area to give a new variety of housing stock to help retain residents in the city of Hammond, give them their place, an opportunity to move from perhaps a smaller house to a larger house, and then the resulting factors of that are new residents, better housing stock, and things like that. As far as noise and air pollution from 70 more cars, I guess I would question the point of that. When Clark Field was active, it was also a parking lot for the high school, so there were probably more than 70 cars that were going into the parking lot, so any pollution generated from those cars was probably more than what the residential owners or guests would be using. Higher density of people, well, I think that's a question of, we kind of want to address the fact that we know that the city of Hammond's population has been becoming less over the past 3 censuses. That we were, I think it was in 1990, we were 84,000 people, and now under the 2020 census, we're somewhere around 78,000 people. So we're trying to stem that tide of losing population, and obviously building houses is an opportunity to change that trend. As far as the notifications, we've discussed this a multitude of times about what the state statute says regarding the notification area within 300 feet. I'm going to quickly ask Randy, do you remember off the top of your head the number of letters that went out?
It was well over 40. I think it was 42 or 43.
Okay, so 42 letters are going out, and those, yes, the majority of those letters would have gone to the residences that are to the north of 122nd Street. And
But it was also in the newspaper as well.
yes. It was also in the newspaper. And then I think I've already addressed the comment about the website, and that we're working into improving the notifications. I think part of it is what we're all realizing is that the world has changed. People don't read newspapers like they used to at one time, and we have to really look at the social media aspects and try and improve that interaction and that communication. I hope I've addressed the majority of the, if not all of the comments.
The only one that I note that you didn't address was the fact that the property was made up of multiple parcels. That was replatted a number of months ago into one lot.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. And as responded to by Mr. Peterson, is that several months ago we went through a 2-lot subdivision process, and that was intended to create the new fire station site. We know we've talked publicly that the current fire station needs to be replaced, improved. The city has determined that the southern end of the property will be that location of that new fire station. The rezoning specifically excludes that fire station. It will remain as the S2 institutional zoning district, and that is Lot 1 of Clark Field's addition. So this rezoning applies only to Lot 2, which is really 85% of the property, and then again in the second petition, that's where the subdivision comes in.
I would guess, but I might be best to answer the question about the cost of the infrastructure. So no property taxes or gaming revenue is being used for the cost of the infrastructure. Now that could change depending upon the bids that we get, but the Hammond Common Council has approved an ordinance to set aside a portion of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that the city received from the federal government. So by definition, it is tax money, but it was the portion of tax money that was distributed to this city, the portion of the $53 million that was set aside from ARP money that was used, that has been appropriated for the use of the infrastructure development. Okay, are we good?
Yeah, I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Well, we closed the public hearing.
One comment, and it's not an opinion. When I looked at the flyer,
Wait a minute.
There will be an opportunity, sir, for further comment at the next. We'll have another action to present here, and so that could be your opportunity to speak again. And then there's also a public comment period at the end. I'm sorry, but that's sort of the rules we play by. Okay, so at this point, I would make sure that the commissioners didn't have any other questions for the petitioner. Seeing none, I would go to Mr. Poland for staff report.
Okay, this is CP 2305-2201, Calumet Avenue, a petition to rezone the property from S2 institutional to R1 single-family residential district. Again, this is Lot 2 of the Clark Fields addition. According to statute, that the Plan Commission must consider the 5 criteria for rezoning a petition. Those are illustrated in the staff report. 1, the comprehensive plan. We have pretty much an out-of-date comprehensive plan that talks about the property staying in use as the Clark Fields. For the high school, no one really anticipated all those years ago that the school would be closed. Two current conditions and character. The property is vacant now that with the closure of the high school, and then the fire station is operational and in relatively good condition. Most desirable use of the property is that, an opportunity like this to transform a property into a new use does not occur on a regular basis. That's what the closing of the school has now left us for that opportunity. And the development also incorporates outlots, 6 outlots that could be used either recreationally, active or passive, and then provide for the buffering of the Calumet Avenue traffic. The fourth one is conservation of property values. New development in general always has a positive value on property values, and the larger houses that are being contemplated will help raise the property values for themselves, and it may have an effect for the rest of the neighborhood. Number 5 is the responsible growth and development. Again, this is a unique opportunity for Hammond to develop a new residential neighborhood, providing for more variety in the housing stock with the larger homes on the larger sites. Staff recommendation: staff recommends that the Plan Commission forward the petition to the City Council with a favorable recommendation. If the Plan Commission agrees with the recommendation, the staff requests that this report is adopted by the Plan Commission as preliminary findings of fact.
Thank you, Mr. Poland. Questions from the commissioners to Mr. Poland? Questions? Mr. Hutton?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Poland, did I misunderstand the existing fire station property is going to remain or is not part of this?
As far as the rezoning is concerned, it is a part of the rezoning process. As far as we know for at least the short term, which is an really unknown period of time, that the fire station will remain in place.
Okay,
So, yeah.
thank you.
I might add, Mr. Hutton, that the city is in negotiations with constructing a new fire station at the south end, at Lot 1 of the previously referred to site.
Okay.
And they are very close to signing a contract for the construction of that new station.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Poland? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to recommend, to forward this petition to the city council with a favorable recommendation.
Mr. President, I'd like to make that motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Dye. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Zaney. It's been moved and properly seconded to refer the petition to the city council for the change in rezoning of the current Clark Fields from S2 to R1. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Roll call on the motion.
Roger Brock, Dean Button,
Yes.
Mike Dye,
Yes.
Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton,
Yes,
Thomas Kazmierzak,
Yes.
Dan Spitali, Sharon Zaney, Marcus Taylor.
Yes.
That's 8 ayes, 0 nays.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item CP 23-06. Beg your pardon, thank you. In my haste to move forward, Commissioner Dye reminds me that now that we have agreed to forward this with a favorable recommendation, I would entertain a motion that we accept the staff report as a preliminary finding of fact.
Mr. President, motion to approve the staff report as preliminary findings of fact.
Thank you, Commissioner Dye. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. It's been moved and properly seconded to refer this, or to adopt this report as a preliminary finding of fact. Finding of fact. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Roll call on the motion.
Roger Brock, Dean Button,
Yes.
Mike Dye,
Yes.
Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton,
yes,
Thomas Kazmierzak,
Yes.
Dan Spitali, Sharon Zaney, Marcus Taylor.
Yes.
That's 8 ayes, 0 nays.
Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Now the next item on the agenda is item CP 23-06, petition of the Hammond Department of Redevelopment for a 37-lot and 6 outlot subdivision known as Clark Fields Second Addition to the City of Hammond in a R1 single-family residential district located at 2201 Calumet Avenue within the City of Hammond. Mrs. Rangel, have the notification requirements been met?
Yes, they have.
Thank you. I would turn it over to the petitioner for presentation.
Thank you. Again, my name is Randy Peterson, Avmarsh Consultants, project engineer for this project. I have distributed a handout that I believe you all have, and I'll refer to that from time to time. We've been working with the city for the better part of a year, if not slightly longer, on this. And as was discussed in the prior petition, there have been a number of public input sessions where we developed a number of scenarios and conceptual plans that were discussed at length. Those plans were then basically the one that was most favorable was chosen. We went back, we made more concepts and refined the project until what we have in front of you today. And I have a plat here on a board. We also have in the handout on the fourth sheet is a copy of what's here as well. Let's see here. I think we all know what the property was, as we just discussed. So I don't need to belabor that anymore. Microphone turn off.
Drifts, I'm sorry. We're working on our AV improvement to this chamber.
Okay. So what we have before you is a 37-lot, single-family residential subdivision with 6 outlots. This property is somewhat of a triangular shape, so you lose some efficiencies with laying out square lots. We have taken advantage, though, of those peculiar areas and turned them into outlots, which will be left as open space, landscaped. Some are larger than others. But it'll give opportunity for internal connection to the trail that is along the side of Lake George, as well as buffering to Calumet Avenue. The entire length in front of Calumet Avenue is an outlot that will have a berm and plantings to provide screenings from the traffic that's on Calumet. The berm will be set at a height that does allow for the buffering of the traffic, but not so much that that you can't see out of your backyard from the house into the view of the lakes. These lots are there's a tier of lots along Calumet. Those are 70 feet wide by nearly 210 feet deep. We did that on purpose, again, to allow for some spacing between the road and the houses. The rest of the lots throughout the property are, generally speaking, are 80 feet wide and approximately 130 feet deep. Some are a little shorter, some are a little longer. Again, 6 outlots. The streets will be constructed to the city standards, curb and gutter, drainage, sewers to provide sanitary sewer and water mains throughout. One of the unique things about this project is the fact that there's a large transmission main under what is going to be Davis Street, so we had to kind of work through.
Mr. Peterson, could you try to move the microphone closer to you? I'm not sure if it's functioning very well.
Test. Okay.
It's not good.
So we had to work around some unique challenges on the project from a utility standpoint. In the last page of the handout, it does show the various locations where we are going to be having green space designated for buffering and recreation. There's already kind of a tree line along the trail of Lake George that will mostly remain intact. So we have opportunities to plant some trees and to provide some active play areas as well. See here, I think I've covered most things. This has been working with staff and the departments within the city to get reviews and favorable approvals, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from the commissioners to the petitioner? Any questions? Sure.
Just have a quick question. What would be the average square footage of home you could put on one of these lots?
That's a good question. The 80-foot wide lots have a, Brian, can you help me out here? What's the side yard setback of the, for single family or for R1?
No, it's a 50-foot width, but I believe it's 20% minimum of the frontage, so minimum 5 feet each side.
Okay. So you would be able to get approximately 70 feet wide house, however deep you can. So it really is probably, it's up to the developer, or it's up to the home builders. We don't have anything in particular chosen, but I mean, in the discussions that we've had with city staff, what size houses were we thinking? Probably 1,500 to 2,000 square feet?
It was something that was discussed. I don't know if that has been finalized, because there was some discussion of covenants, and I'm not sure where that conversation is.
Yeah. So it's still kind of up in the air, but within the parameters of the R1 residential.
And then second question, with the water table as high as it is, would those have basements or? No?
We don't anticipate basements,
Okay.
no.
Sump ups would help.
Yeah.
Right, but
That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other questions for the petitioner? I would just make comment more than anything. There was a large water main that runs through the middle of the site, sort of a constraint that we had to work around, and I think Hammond Marsh did a great job with their layout of their subdivision plan to accommodate for those utilities.
President, is there any cul-de-sacs going to be in this? Is there gonna be-
No, well, technically speaking, one, but that is the Lake Street to the far east. And just for the record, the map that I have on here, north is to the left. We couldn't fit it with the scale we were using on the sheet, so north is to the left. Lake Street right now is a dead end, and we are developing the west side of Lake Street to match the east side, and we are putting a cul-de-sac at the end to formally cap that. No, nothing other than that. Everything is internal. Yeah, it's all internal connected streets.
Meaning that to me, tell me what that means.
Pardon?
What does that mean? What you just said?
That there's no dead-end streets or cul-de-sacs within the remainder of the subdivision. All the streets either connect and have intersections or go through to other existing streets. We have
How many be on that cul-de-sac? How many homes do you have on that cul-de-sac?
three.
3 homes?
Three new.
Three new.
Three new, 3 or 4 existing.
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Oh, thanks. Go ahead, Commissioner Kazmierzak.
So, two of the more recent developments that I can remember in the city for housing, people were able to purchase the property, auction, or purchase the lot, bring in their own, development, pick their own home that they want to build. Is that how this is going to be as well? Are they going to, or is this all being assigned to one developer? He's going to put up 37 houses, and then those houses are going to be sold?
No, the lots will be going out through the auction process.
Okay.
Yes.
There'll be a limit on the number of lots that can be acquired by any one entity.
Gotcha.
All of that is being worked on by our legal consultant, who there'll be discussions about the nature and types of home. I'm sure the size of the homes will be set, the architecture, the preferences, those sorts of things will be a document that will be made available to those who want to purchase through auction.
In place, like similar
Yes,
to
sir.
what they did in Parachute.
Easement covenants and restrictions. ECR.
I don't think that comment was captured by the recording.
The statement was that there will be a covenant in place for the builders and the developers to meet a certain criteria.
Yes, that is the expectation.
Okay, thank you.
The lawyers are working on that. Yep. Any other questions for the petitioner? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. At this point in time, we'll be able to open it up for public hearing. If there's anyone in the audience wishing to speak on this topic, please come forward. Please sign in, state your name and address, and please.
Well, I'll put my name down twice.
That's not necessary, is it, Brian?
No, once is fine.
Thank you, Mrs. Marsh. You can. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to get some, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. I have to get some questions out of the way. This is a zoning, a public hearing for zoning change. Are we also
That was the last
approving-
action, ma'am. The zoning was the last action we just approved.
So what is this
This is
public
the
hearing?
plat. We're approving
This
the
is,
subdivision
oh,
plat.
see, this is very confusing.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I mean, who knew that there was, I thought this was about the zoning too. I didn't understand why there's 2 meetings on zoning. But this is about the city, this meeting is approving the plat design?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm definitely against that.
Okay.
I mean, that is, nobody knows this is going on.
It was identified clearly in the notifications that there were 2 petitions, one for rezoning and one for subdivision.
Oh, well, nobody saw it. It's not on your website. It's not on a redevelopment commission. It's not on the planning commission. You cannot find out what you're doing, and the language is so simple that we don't understand how difficult these, this area is.
The public notifications requirements by statute were met, ma'am.
I know your statute, but that's not getting to the public. That's not public input. That's not getting the message out to the community.
The city's had
now,
2
I
public
want to
meetings.
say this, that this part, you mentioned, Brian, something about park department. Are you talking about that the school district, the school gave Clark Field to the park department? And then the park department gave it to redevelopment?
Yes, I said that.
Is that what you said? Nobody knew that, and nobody said that at any of the 2 public meetings on this. And this is outrageous.
Mr. President, may I ask a question? Are we talking about this number 06? Is that what we're talking about
Yes, sir.
here? Okay,
This is the subdivision.
thank you very much.
Okay. So, Ms. Marsh, if you could keep your comments specific to the subdivision. That's what that's what the public
I'm trying to
hearing is.
understand what I'm supposed to be speaking on because it's not clear, and I'm making it clear on this, in my remarks, how confusing this is, and it's deliberately confusing. At no time did we hear that the school district gave Clark Field, there was a transfer of land over by the school where the new school is going to be. There was land there given for baseball fields and stuff, but no one ever admitted that the whole Clark Field School was transferred to the park department. It doesn't matter whether the park department did something with it or not. They had control of the property, and nobody knew about it, and in any of these meetings, this was withheld. And that's very disturbing. So the other question is, this is 37 lots. And the meetings, the 2 meetings held at the marina on this, which were very poorly attended because they were very poorly advertised, there were three possibilities of housing. The one that the people picked was 24 lots, the lesser of all of the 3. And now we're having 37 lots? So something is wrong there. You didn't choose what the people wanted. They wanted the 24 lots, not the 37. So that's a problem here that we're having. Now, I want to get into why I object also to this development in all its complicities, which is too mind-boggling for me to understand. I think that George Lake is polluted. Polyjohn added pollution to it by discharging through pipes into George Lake plastic polychlorine pellets. That plan to clean it up has not been made public. So whatever happens to George Lake, that's next door to this Clark Field. It's only separated by NIPSCO lines, an easement, NIPSCO easement. And so that they have to mitigate for the damage they're doing to George Lake. They're doing serious damage. It's going to have to be drained and dredged. But there has to be a fine, there has to be mitigation. The city should want that. And I think the Clark Field would be the perfect mitigation for the damage done by Polyjohn, Federated Metals, Whiting Metals to George Lake, a federally protected wetland. I also think that nothing should be done on this because it's now the area is being considered on the national priority list as a Superfund site, a US EPA Superfund site. So when they're cleaning up, they've got to tear down Federated Metals, Whiting Metals. That has to come down. I don't know what Polygon is going to do, because
You
that's
can find your remarks to the subdivision itself, ma'am, please.
This is
You're
the next
talking about
door. They're
Polygon
a
and
neighbor.
Federated
They're a
Metals, which
neighbor.
are
It's public
unrelated to
land.
the subdivision.
They are a neighbor to. They can't speak because it's water. So I'm speaking for nature here. And a bird watcher
Please
who
confine
has.
your
I
remarks to
have
the
a
subdivision, ma'am.
definite interest in this area. It's a Superfund site, and I think building anything on Clark Field when it's a Superfund site and there's an air pollution issue in the cleanup and soil excavation. The third issue is I don't think anything can be done until it's the Clark High School and Middle School issue is settled. That it's in the state hands now because the city of Hammond and the school system didn't want the school, so it reverted legally to the state. It could be, those buildings could be used for something. And so I think that the decision to develop Clark Field should be held off for that reason and the two other reasons. Superfund site, and because it's the damage done to the neighbor to the subdivision, proposed subdivision, it would affect those new homes, and the city could be subject to lawsuits.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wishing to speak on behalf or on this petition? Mr. Matera?
Yes. Do I need to sign in again?
No, sir.
So I will say, again, thank you for letting me speak. I'm disappointed in your vote, but it is what it is. And in anticipating that you might approve what you did approve, I was looking at the plot plan earlier, and I know at the meetings at the marina, the city administration and the engineering firm said they would consider a buffer along the bike path. And I really don't see that buffer, and as this gentleman said tonight, only the odd-shaped properties that couldn't be developed are going to be the buffer or the green space. So it's almost out of default that, hey, we can't do anything with outlet A, we can't do anything with outlet B, let's just make them green, because what else can they be? At the meeting, the concern was, can we have a buffer all along? And that could be achieved by forfeiting 2 of the residential lots, then that buffer would be complete. So in tonight's discussion of the plot plan, I would appeal to you that you consider removing Lot 4 and Lot 37 from development and leave them as additional green space.
Thank you.
And that's one point. The other point is, I see that there's the remark that there be some play areas adjacent to the bike path. And I know just walking the bike path can be pretty dangerous when these bikes are coming through. And there's some very serious bikers in groups of 5 or 6, and they're moving very, very fast. So you have to be on guard. I wouldn't want to see a play area adjacent to the bike path, excuse me, for where it says active play area at the trail connection. I'd be afraid that if a child or kids ran out in that bike path, that they or the bicyclist could get hurt pretty seriously. I think those would be not good locations for play areas. I think it's good to be green, but I thought the whole idea was to minimize the amount of people in those areas and keep it a bit natural and provide a buffer. And there was also the remark that a cul-de-sac would be put on Lake Avenue. And I think to myself, there's 3 houses on Lake Avenue now. They exist without a cul-de-sac. Why aren't those people worthy of a cul-de-sac? But if we put in 3 new houses, we get the cul-de-sac. And looking at the plot plan, the cul-de-sac would infringe on property going towards the lake, if I'm right. And I would say, I don't think we need a cul-de-sac there. It's just more concrete and more asphalt. I would think if there was a problem, those three families would have said, hey, we need a cul-de-sac. There's essentially no traffic on that dead end. And just an aside, what I was going to comment on earlier is all those notices did go out, but a portion of those properties are owned by single individuals that have multiple rental properties. So even if you sent 40 notices out, and I didn't really count them, but I just noticed there was a redundancy in certain names that just kept coming up. And I thought, how could that guy, oh, okay, he owns 2 properties on Davis Avenue, he owns 2 properties on West Park. So he essentially is one family, but 4 notices got sent out. And that's only because I knew his name. There may have been more. And it is interesting that in the write-up, it states from the city that the fire station is operable and in good condition. And yet, we're building a new fire station. So I'm confused with that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And if you would, please consider removing Lot 4 and Lot 37. And I know that's 2 out of 37 lots, so it's not the end of the world to make that, give that up. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak? Mr. Hustek? And you do not have to sign in, sir. Thank you.
This is just very quick. I stand corrected saying earlier that there were probably 10 people that received notices. You corrected me at 40. But out of those 40, I would like to know if you received a proof of delivery. Because just because you sent out the notices doesn't mean that they actually received it. Or, yeah, again, the law requires proof of delivery, and I haven't seen that happen in the past. The only thing I'm asking about is you nicely described the, I guess, the barrier from Calumet Avenue to the housing. But I didn't hear about the barrier between the housing and the bike trail. I just didn't hear it. The gentleman's back was turned to me. The microphone wasn't working, and I didn't hear. What I did hear was standing trees or trees that were going to be existing there. I guess I'm asking, is there going to be an actual barrier, from the housing, between the housing and the bike trail? That's all.
Thank you. I see online there's an Elizabeth Corella who has her hand up. I'll assume that you would like to make a public comment. If you could state your name for the record and your address, please.
Yes, Elizabeth Corella, 2133 Davis Avenue in Robertsdale. And I would like to see a picture of this plat that you are discussing. Is there a way to hold it up to the screen so I could get a screenshot or some way of actually seeing what is being discussed?
Oh, Randy, can you move that closer? Or do you need it closer?
I'm not sure they can see it online based upon Zoom situation.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, unfortunately, based on the technology, we cannot do that.
Can we try, Mr. Peterson, if you could bring the board to this side of the
Oh, right.
console,
Gotcha.
and do the best you can with holding that, just the board.
Hold it to the laptop, so
the
the laptop
laptop
camera will
image.
pick it up. We're going to try and figure this out, Ms. Corella.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, it's not in focus.
Back up a little.
Back up.
There you go.
Even worse.
So to the
Well,
left, to the left.
okay. What is the difference? Can you explain the discrepancy that Carolyn Marsh was explaining, that the plan recommended and approved by the residents at the meeting, and this one? What are the main differences? it looks to me totally different. And will there be, as the mayor promised, an opportunity for all the residents of the area to see this before it is voted on and approved?
We can address your comment, ma'am.
Did you not hear me?
Yes, we'll address your comment as soon
Oh,
as
I see. Thank
as soon
you.
as we conclude the public hearing, when we get the
Okay.
public comment. Anyone else on the electronic media virtual meeting would like to make comment about this petition? If it's not inconvenient for you, Ms. Corella, if you could put your hand down in case you want to ask another question later, then
Yes, thank you.
then if your hand goes up, we'll know
You'll
that.
know that I'm still here.
Yeah, that you have another comment, but we're sort of close to the end of the public comment period. Later in the meeting, we will have public comment as an agenda item. So if there's follow-up questions, we can certainly take that prior to the close of the meeting. So is there any other individual wishing to address this petition with the commission? Last call. Any other comment regarding this petition? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing portion of the meeting. And I'd ask the petitioner to come forward, and between Mr. Peterson, Mr. Poland, and myself will address the comments. Who wants to start?
I can start.
Thank you, Mr. Poland.
Okay. As stated, the school city transaction was to the Parks Department. I think, Ms. March, you made reference to the Hammond High School, Central High School, and that property. What actually happened was it was a property exchange between School City, and because we were exchanging with the Civic Center property, that's why the transaction of Clark went to the Parks Department, because Parks was transferring the football field at Hammond Central, that property, to School City. So that's why it initially went to the Parks Department.
Brian, could you just also comment about a public process related to the exchange of property? Because that was a step that was required in the exchange, the transfer of property. I guess I'll do it. There was a process where the Parks Department received the property from the School City in exchange for the property that occurred between the city, the Parks Department, to the School City. So that was a public process, and that was made. Public notices were held for that transfer. So this did not happen in a vacuum. These transactions were public. They were handled both at the School City and at the Parks Department.
The reason that was transferred from the Parks Department to the Redevelopment Commission is because of how the state statute is written related to what city entity can dispose of property at that point. So the Redevelopment Commission, because of its laws, is the appropriate entity for us to go out through the auction process and then to sell the individual lots in there. The Parks Department, because of its structure under state law, it could not do that. The comment was made that the meetings at the marina were poorly attended. I take exception to that comment because I was at those meetings and there was well over 100 people in the room on both of the major meetings. As far as a comment about the environmental issues, I don't want to speak as if I have a lot of authority on what the Department of Environmental Management has, but I do want to make a couple of comments. The City of Hammond is very well aware of the Federated Metals situation, and is very well aware of the Polyjohn situation. Unless I misunderstood what you said, Ms. Marsh, nothing in the information about federated metals and the Superfund designation has any effect whatsoever on Clark Field. It is not a Superfund site. The issue of Polyjohn and the little plastic pellets, and again, the Environmental Management Department is on top of that situation and working with the state on a regular basis. I will then also say that Environmental Management Department has also looked at Clark Fields and done its due diligence, and there are no environmental problems indicated whatsoever in HDEM's review. The issue of Clark High School, and I think you made the statement that the high school is in the state hands. I'm not exactly the context of that you meant that, but the ownership of Clark Fields is still in School City's hands.
It's Clark High School, not the field.
Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you for the correction. Clark High School. Clark Middle High School. I think what you're referring to is the provision in state law that says how can School City dispose of its properties? And there is a state law that says there's a pecking order in which how that is disposed of. That issue is for School City. It is not a part of this petition. I think there were some statements made about the outlots. I know I said in my report that the open space is either active or passive. Based on the handout that was provided by Abin Marsh, if you look at the proposed landscaping that is on these areas, the vast majority of these outlets are going to be passive. There is one play area noted, but it is intended to be a passive area with trail connections or connections from the residential neighborhood to the bike trail. And we've already discussed that the one outlot along Calumet Avenue will be a buffer, a berm, and just by the nature of its size and how it's developed, that will not be an active recreational area. The issue of the cul-de-sac, I know through the various discussions that we had before we came up with the 5 options, I don't know if we even, well, maybe those are internal before Abin Marsh that got involved. You know, we kind of talked about whether or not there should be cul-de-sacs, and we thought it was very important that the street system be integrated and coordinated with the existing street system. On Lake Avenue, because Randy said street, right? The area that is being dedicated a part of this subdivision, and without me looking at the figure, it is probably, 3,000 square feet or less. It is only to get that portion of the circle into the right-of-way. Basically 95% of the cul-de-sac will fit into the existing public right-of-way, which is 60 feet. And just by design, they needed a little extra property in order to get the turning radius to fit. Some comments about the notifications and the redundancy of owners. It's very common in the city of Hammond that there are property owners within this 300-foot area that may own one or more property. That's just a fact of life. We, by rule, if a property owner owns one or more property and the information in the county assessor, the GIS system states that the owner's name and the owner's mailing address is exactly the same, that we can combine the letters. We sometimes combine them we literally will combine the letters in the manner which, because if you look at the letter, it says, you are the owner of property X. And if you owe more than one, it's going to be, you are the property owner of X, Y, and Z. So we are meeting the requirements that the individual is notified for each property under its ownership. I think in this case, we also put the rezoning letter and the subdivision letter in the same envelope, so everybody got both notifications. The comment that I made that the fire station was in good condition, in my staff report, I think the alternative of me saying that the fire station is in poor condition, I don't think anybody wants to say publicly or imply that a fire station is in poor condition. It's clearly an active fire station. It's done its job for a number of years to serve this neighborhood, as well as the cooperative agreement that Robertsdale has with the city of Whiting and helping each other out should a bad fire occur. It doesn't change the fact that the fire station does not meet the current requirements. The new fire station gives us an opportunity to get better equipment, and those are larger vehicles, and so therefore it needs to be a larger bay area for the trucks to fit in there. The comment about proof of delivery, I think this might be more of a semantic issue. Certified mail is by the post office rules, it is a white receipt and it is a green card. The white receipt is proof that our mail went into the mail system. The green cards are proof that the person received it. There are other forms of certified mail. You can get certified mail without return receipt, and therefore you would have no means to know whether or not the person actually received it. So we do that two-step process. We collect all the green cards. We know who received them. But the statute says proof of notification, meaning the white street receipts went out. There's nothing in the statute that says that we actually have to have 100% of the green cards back. And in our experience, and I will say this, my experience over the past 34 years, we have never received all green cards back for a variety of reasons. Unfortunately, my note says barrier, and I don't really recall.
Between the house and the driveway.
Buffer to, okay, so we'll let Randy address that.
Right. What I had said about the buffer along the trail is that the existing trees that are in place will largely remain in place, and so there's really not going to be any change to the buffer that's there. There's no plan on creating any more buffer other than maybe adding a few trees in the outlots that are shown. So there's no berms, there's no fences, there's nothing like that planned along the trail itself.
Mr. Peterson, can I ask, reference to your drawing, the last sheet on your drawing, sort of, are you with me? Mm-hmm. The last sheet of your drawing packet. You've been to the site?
Yes.
You've been to the, how would you characterize the growth that currently is along the bike trail?
There's some decent stands of trees. There's some that's kind of an underbrush type of a thing. I think just a general cleanup and sprucing of that would be beneficial.
Is there any open or direct connected areas between the bike trail and the current athletic fields?
No.
No,
No,
so
only,
you can't, it's not easy for someone to pass between the bike trail and the current property.
that's correct. There is a connection off of Lake Avenue, but it's not the greatest.
Is there any plan in this, and I can see it, is there any plan in this proposal that would improve access to the bike trail?
You know, we show reconstruction of the one off of Lake Avenue. but the addition of 2 more connections to the trail from internal, from the internal streets of the subdivision.
But it does sort of show going through this overgrowth area, so you'd have to clear some of the overgrowth to make access available
Sure,
in these
yes.
locations. And then there was some discussion about the active play area and its proximity to the trail. If in your experience or your profession, how far would you say that active area is from the bike trail? There was some characterization that kids playing in the active area could potentially come in contact with bicyclists nearby. How close is that active area to the bike trail?
As shown on this particular drawing, it's at least 50, maybe 75 feet at its closest point, and then another 100 feet to its furthest point. So the furthest point would be probably close to 200 feet away from the trail.
So you don't expect children who are playing in the active play area to easily fall into the trail?
No.
Thank you. And you're basing this, I would say, casually, the distance basically knowing that the right-of-way, the road right-of-way is approximately how wide?
60 feet.
60 feet, right. So using the road right-of-way of 60 feet, you can sort of base your determination that none of these play areas are that close to the, okay.
Correct.
Any other comments on the questions that were asked?
One comment that was that this particular plan before the commission now is not the same as what was presented at the public input sessions. And I did pull it up. There was 5 plans at the last public input session.
Contrary to what was stated earlier, right? It was
Correct.
Earlier was stated 3. There were 5
There were
separate.
5 separate.
5 different plans that were presented
Right.
at the mayor's meeting. Yeah.
3 of which had commercial reserved along Calumet Avenue, which would be where the western tier of lots 22 to 32 are located. Those were not viewed upon favorably and were basically removed from the operating plan here, which leaves 2. One was a 46-lot subdivision. One was a 35-lot subdivision. We have 37 lots. Both plans had 3 lots that backed up to the trail. The petition before you have 2 lots that back up against the trail. One of the options had along the south end at 123rd had 3 lots that would butt up against the future fire station property, lot 1. There was 3 lots. The other had none. So I believe we are closer to the less dense one, and most likely after we started to engineer this and place things more precisely and work around the utilities that we were concerned about early on, it just provided a little bit more efficiency where we were able to get 2 more lots without really changing the character of the subdivision. The streets are identical, where we have Davis that comes from the north and curves and wraps into Calumet, and where we have Stanton comes from the north and wraps, goes south and curves and intersects onto Davis. It's the same layout. Size of the lots are nominally the same. And like I said, between the 45-lot subdivision, the lots were smaller, and it was elected to go with the less dense version. So that version was 35, this is 37, and I believe that was just because of the efficiency of the way we had it finally laid out.
So my recollection is the more densely laid out subdivision, those lots were the so-called minimum lot size, right? So
That's correct.
the intent was to see how many lots we could fit on the site. And I would agree with your characterization that commercial was overwhelmingly voted down by the residents, and that the residents felt like they wanted larger lot sizes and no commercial development against Calumet Avenue, and extending those lots as deeply as we could with a berm along Calumet Avenue. This was the overwhelming response by the 100 or more people that were in attendance at that meeting, and that's the direction that your company had moved forward based upon the city's desires. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions from the commissioners to the petitioner? Okay, thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Poland, I guess it's time for the staff report.
Again, for the record, this is a subdivision of Lot 2 of Clark Fields Addition for 37 single-family lots and 6 outlots that would be for open space. The single-family lots range from 9,801 square feet to 19,006 square feet. The minimum lot size in an R1 district is 7,500 square feet. So these lots are quite a bit larger than what the minimum requirements are. We talked about that Clark Avenue has a major water line in it, and you can correct me, I don't remember what the diameter of that water line is.
54, if I remember right.
50, somewhere around 50.
36. Did you say 36?
36 inches, so it's a 3-foot diameter pipe. And obviously, we want to make sure that that pipe is not adversely affected whatsoever, because that is the water line that serves the rest of the city and ultimately goes to all the customer communities to the south. There's actually a secondary one that follows the alley that by plat exists along the bike trail, which is where the NIPSCO utility lines are. There's a water line in there that also helps get that water to the southern part of the city. Within the plat, or within the property, there's also a 6-inch water line that falls mostly on the extension of Stanton Avenue, the extension of 123rd Street, and then cuts through the lot 30. That is that water line serves no purpose anymore with this development. We've already received the release of easement from the water department, and as to from construction purposes, whether it's removed, replaced, whatever, that is a part of the engineering plans to eliminate that. Obviously, specifically under lot 30, that water line has to be taken out so someone can build a house on it. The utilities have been thought about very thoroughly, where the easements are, trying to make sure that as many utilities as possible are in the backyard and not on the street, and we'll design that, and it's being designed accordingly. The plat also has along Calumet Avenue, and this was established under the first Clark Fields addition. There is a sidewalk easement that is along Calumet Avenue to help the pedestrian traffic in that area. And if you look, obviously those that are familiar with the property, that's also where a NIPSCO line is there. So it's, trying to give some more pedestrian access to that part of Calumet Avenue as well as in this neighborhood. The subdivision plat was sent out to the agencies for review. We had some comments that came back from Comcast as far as how they're going to serve this property, and we made some adjustments in the easements in order to accommodate that. To note for the record, NIPSCO did object to the utility easement in the rear yard, and we will continue that conversation with NIPSCO in order to get the utilities where they are least intrusive. And then no other objections or concerns are received by the other utilities. Staff's opinion is that the plat meets the requirements set forth in the subdivision control ordinance and recommends for preliminary and final approval of the subdivision plat, subject to any of the technical corrections, and I'm going to amend slightly by saying, and subject to the council approval of the rezoning. I do want to note that Mr. Peters and I have been working the past several days, and I think we have gotten all the technical corrections identified and resolved. And those that know me, I'll look at it one more time, and I'll make sure. If the Plan Commission agrees with the staff report as amended, it is recommended that the staff report is adopted as findings of fact.
Questions from the commissioners to Mr. Poland. Mr. Hutton.
Thank you. Mr. Poland, did I understand that all utilities will be underground?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good question, Mr. Hutton.
And actually, Mr. Hutton,
Yes.
it is a requirement in the subdivision control ordinance when we have new subdivisions like this that all the utilities are underground.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Poland from the commissioners? Mr. Poland, is there anything in your recommendation today that would stop the administration from converting lots 4 and 37 to outlots in the future? If we were to approve this today as presented, is there anything that would prevent making those 2 lots green spaces?
No, there's nothing that would prevent that. Yeah, obviously it'd be a situation we'd probably retain ownership and then, resolve it that way. I mean, arguably, since they are identified as they are with a number as opposed to a letter, they are, by this plat, they're technically buildable lots, but there's nothing wrong with repurposing that. It just will be, this technical incompatibility with how we number buildable lots from non-buildable lots.
Okay. Mr. Hutton.
I do have one question pertaining. That's a good question.
Thank you.
And that is, do we need this board's approval to make that change? Lots 4 and 37?
I guess my thought is we could approve as presented, and if the administration didn't want to build houses on those lots, they could decide that and not go to auction. Then potentially by default, they not be constructed on, they could potentially be converted to parkland.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just in response to the remonstration made, the possibilities there. I just didn't want to preclude that. I mean, I think the intent is those are nice lots for potential development, and they should be included, but there is consideration that could be made. Any other questions for Mr. Poland? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to recommend preliminary and final approval of the subdivision plat, subject to the technical corrections and subject to approval of the rezoning by the Hammond Common Council.
Mr. President, motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Dye. Commissioner Dye, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Zaney. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the plat as preliminary and final plat approval of the subdivision, subject to technical corrections and subject to the rezoning of the by the Common Council. Is there any other discussion? Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Roll call on the motion.
Roger Brock, Dean Button.
Yes.
Mike Dye.
Yes.
Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton.
Yes.
Thomas Kazmierzak.
Yes.
Dan Spitali. Sharon Zaney. Marcus Taylor.
Yes.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Poland. The chair would also entertain a motion to accept the staff report as a finding of fact,
As amended.
as amended.
Yeah.
Mr. President, motion to approve the staff report as presented
Thank you, Commissioner Dye.
with the, as amended.
Thank you, Commissioner Dye. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Dye and properly seconded by Commissioner Kazmierzak to approve the staff report as a finding of fact as amended. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Roll call on the motion.
Roger Brock, Dean Button,
Yes.
Mike Dye,
Yes.
Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton,
Yes.
Thomas Kazmierzak,
Yes.
Dan Spitali, Sharon Zaney, Marcus Taylor.
Yes.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
Motion carries. I did see that Ms. Cruella's hand was up. We can take public comment following the proper item in our agenda, so I will come back to you when I can take public comment. Next item on the agenda is item 6, correspondence. Mr. Poland?
There's no correspondence.
Thank you. Item 7 is commissioner comments. Seeing none, item 8 would be staff comments.
At this time, I am not expecting a May Plan Commission meeting, but I will, something may show up this week, but I think there's a good possibility that we will not have a May Plan Commission meeting.
Which would have been scheduled for May 15th.
Yes.
Any other staff comments?
No.
Thank you. Now we're at a point of public comment. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address Mrs. Marsh?
You want to go to her first?
Sign-in sheet.
Hand's been up.
I'm returning it.
Sorry, I called Mrs. Marsh first.
Carolyn Marsh, 1804 Oliver Street. When is the city council going to vote on this? I would like to know that. And then I just, that one of the covenants on the property owners, the people that are going to buy these properties, when is that going to be made public, what the covenants are on what the design is on each lot? I think that's important to know. I thought that would be made public by now. I also wanted to say that you made a comment, Mr. President, that I was out of order because nobody lived, George Lake, nobody lived there.
I never said that, ma'am.
Well, you implied that I was out of order
No, I
when I
asked
was
you to stick to
talking
the
about
point,
George Lake.
I
Let me-
asked you to stick to the point about the
Well,
subdivision map.
that's right. You asked me,
Thank you.
and I thought
Thank
I
you.
was sticking to the point. What I'm thinking now is that George Lake is public property. And maybe it involves everybody being noticed of that public property, not just the 300 feeters, that residents. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is that renters then may not have been notified if the owner of the property, so I'm not clear on what happened there if the property owner owns a lot of properties, but the renters didn't know about it, and with the renters, whether they could participate in the public hearing or not. Maybe they thought they couldn't because they were not the owner of the property. So that's unclear to me whether renters had a right to get public notice from the property owner. That would eliminate a lot of people if renters are not involved. And I think that when you have public property as the neighbor, certainly George Lake is 300 feet from Clark Field. That's public property, so this should have been a public notice. It should be on all the city's websites, on redevelopment, on park. All the departments that led to this decision should have all properly notified the public of what is going on, and that didn't happen. Also, I attended the 2 meetings plus Mayor's Night Out meetings, and I took pictures of the attendance. And I can tell you there was not 100 people at both at meetings at the marina, because you can count heads in my photographs. But that's an opinion. What I am saying, there was no sign-in sheet. So what you're saying that there's 100 people, you didn't even have a sign-up sheet of those attending. That's how bad the meeting was run. There should have been a sign-up sheet at those meetings to know exactly who was attending. So you could make the claim that 100 people were there. But we don't, a lot of them were realtors. They didn't live in the area. So I'm just making these points that I think that really the public has been locked out of a lot of these decisions. The fact that we're voting on the plat right today, you are, is shocking to me. I was unaware of that.
Thank you, ma'am. There's something
Thank
else
you.
that we should speak. Mrs. Cruella, would you like to address the commission?
Yes. You mentioned a couple of the concerns that the residents at those meetings expressed, and they are addressed in this plan. Larger lots, no commercial, the berm, etc. The one thing that you did not mention that was significant in what the residents wanted were the plants with the maximum green space. You kind of tiptoed around that a bit when you asked if the couple of lots could be turned back into green space. I think, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Were the plans for green space turned into lots from the meeting with the residents? And why are those not retained as green space when that is what the residents wanted?
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, if there's no further comment.
Can I clarify or answer a couple of things?
Okay, sure, Mr. Poland.
There were questions asked, and I would like to answer a couple of the questions. And I've asked for permission from the president, and I was granted permission. As far as the question of when does this occur before the city council, I think that information, everybody should know the answer to that question, and I'm happy to let everybody know that our procedure is that we have some documentation that we have to prepare in order to go to the city council. Our expectation is to meet the deadline of 10 o'clock on Wednesday for that to be then put on the agenda for next Monday's council meeting. And that is when the ordinance to rezone is introduced. And then the council's procedures, also in accordance with state statute, they will set the date upon which that they will make the final decision. It's called a notice of intent to consider, and typically that is on the subsequent council meeting, but that would be under the discretion of the council as to how they want to handle that. As far as the comment about renters being notified, again, by statute, we're notifying property owners. I don't know of any effective way for us to even know who's renting property, for us to even send a letter to them. And as far as that would be an obligation of the owner to notify his tenants if they so choose. That's all I wanted to answer.
Take one more public comment, Mr. Matera.
So, in regards to Lot 4 and Lot 37, those are along the bike trail, and listening to the presenter, it makes me think that in the paper the other day I saw this high fire danger, and it was over at the Gary Airport. There was the fire, and there's all that tall reed grass, Phragmites. So along that section of bike trail is Phragmites taller than you and I. And if those houses are adjacent to the bike trail, I'd be afraid that they're at risk that if someone inadvertently lights that, like kids do occasionally, that that's in their backyard. So
Thank you.
it might be in their best interest that there not be houses there. And a lot of the trees that were there are invasive species, the tree of heaven. And I think as part of the plan, maybe it should be incorporated that those invasive species, the Phragmites is an invasive cane, and the tree of heaven is an invasive tree, that they be removed and maybe, and as you'll notice on the other side of the bike trail, the marina or the Mylan and Company had the DNR come in and treat that. All that cane is gone, which removed a huge fire hazard, and all the natural plants came in. It's beautiful in May and June. Maybe that utility right-of-way, and maybe these lots could be incorporated, that there be some natural plan to get rid of the invasive species.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Okay. So we think that there probably won't be a plan commission meeting on May the 15th, so if not, we'll see you in June. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Hutton, second by Councilman Spitali. Did you motion, Councilman Spitali?
Right here.
Were you the second? I'm going to give you credit. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, all opposed? Motion carries, we're adjourned.